Hey, what's up everybody? Leanne Del Carpio, and I want to talk with you today about why it's important to take charge of our energy through our physiology first. Let's see if you can relate to any of these sentiments, these thoughts, these feelings that I've heard in conversation with leaders across the globe over the past couple of weeks. One, my office is reopening. They want me to come back in a certain kind of blend of hybrid, in-person and virtual, and I'm really in an existential crisis. I'm not really sure if I am as much aligned with what I was doing and how I was managing my energy in the past. I felt like prior to COVID, I was spinning out of control, crazy busy, not making time or energy for reflection, for integration, for my values, my family, other things that are important to me. And I'm worried that by going back to the office, I'll just default into an old way of being that no longer serves me. Someone else said, I feel like I'm in a kind of an existential crisis. Like, I love what I do on the one hand, but number two, I really have found a greater sense of resourcing myself over the past year. Even with all the restrictions, I've found ways that are more expansive, and I don't want to lose that. How do I keep that going in the face of ongoing change? And number three, even before COVID, there were problems in the way that our organization is structured that were pushing to treat people like mechanistic pieces in a cog or in a wheel. And those problems haven't truly been addressed. So when the pandemic goes away, those burnout issues are not going to go away either. So I can wait for the organization to change their structure, their processes, their systems, but what can I do in the meantime to really take charge of my energy in spite of those limitations? These are real conversations with real leaders who have been grappling with how they can really manage the ongoing onslaught of change, challenge, chaos, uncertainty. And certainly the pandemic hyper-accelerated that. But here's the thing, guys. When we are faced with an unparalleled level of change, whether it's a pandemic or something else that's likely to happen in your industry, your organization, your family, your community, there's basically two core kind of human responses that most of us fall into. And I myself am guilty of both of these. See if you can kind of spot it within yourself. Number one, when that change hits, we kind of brace ourselves. We dig in, we kind of, you see me kind of bracing my body, right? I'm kind of trying to gut through, push through until the storm passes. It's this mentality of like, I'll just do what it takes in order to get through. I'll just add on. I'll stay up till midnight and just like plow through, right? And what it does is kind of pushes us into this like grit or grind or gut through, soldier on kind of way of being, feeling and thinking and acting. The other mode is to distract ourselves, to kind of step away, to go, oh, look, something new on Netflix. I think I'm just gonna grab glass of wine and I don't know, bag of potato chips, whatever, right? And I'm gonna watch that, distract myself, perhaps even step away from it and withdraw until it is safe to then make a decision and move forward. Now, both of those reactions, I'm sure you can recognize within yourself. I can literally point to times when I've done both of those. And sometimes either one of those actions can be the appropriate, healthy, natural reaction that we need to take on to either meet the immediate needs, right, or take care of ourselves. At the same time, overdone, they can actually lead to more habituated ways of being. We kind of become neurologically set in a particular way of being. The thing is, these are the two natural ways that our nervous system responds under threat and stress, right? Either in a fight mode, the first mode, or in a little bit more of a flight mode, the second mode. Lean in, pull away, right? Again, when we have dexterity and we can reach for one or the other as is appropriate with the immediate kind of threat as our brain perceives it, it allows us hopefully some resourceful approach in the moment. Left unaided and left unattended, it can lead to an extreme. And it does not necessarily use the energy of the disruption and the friction itself to lead us forward. And that's where a third approach to handling unparalleled levels of change comes in. My colleague, Dr. Carla Stanton, and I have a third approach that we use when facing into these levels of change and chaos. And that has to do with using the energy of disruption and friction as fuel. Considering that whatever is being upended in the moment, no matter how unsavory it is in the moment, may actually be showing us some glimpse into a future that wants to emerge. And if that is the case, then there's energy to be harnessed. But if we want to harness that energy, we actually have to use all data available, not just our brains, not just the cognitive analysis. Or better, some of us use cognitive and emotional, kind of emoting and kind of sensing from an empathy perspective what is needed, who is wanting to be served. That's an advancement. But we leave a lot on the table when we don't also tap into our physiology. Why physiology? Why might we want to think about physiology first? It's again related to how our nervous systems interpret stress. And if you think about it, whether it be a saber-toothed tiger outside of our cave back in the day, or a boss today, or your boss's boss, or your boss's boss's boss asking for a presentation by tomorrow at a certain time, or a teenager asking for some support after dealing with some bullying situation at school. Whatever can kind of create an environment where we are feeling a perceived lack of being able to control all of the components. That's how our body interprets stress. It's a perceived lack of control. And it kind of anchors into our physiology. That's why our physiology moves into chaos. And we can measure that more chaotic way of being in our physiology through biomarkers, through different ways that our biology is existing. So your heart rhythms, right? This is like one way. If we're in true heart-brain coherence, where our nervous systems are calm and we feel expansive in a mode of kind of creation, you would see a smooth pattern in our heart rate variability. And if we are in a bit of chaos where there's signals being sent from up the vagal pathway as we're taking in sight, sound, smell, etc., and it moves up our nervous system, up the spinal cord, from our physiology to our heart, and then to our limbic system, and ultimately, finally, to the prefrontal cortex, you would notice a kind of erratic pattern. And so if we can slow down when we are facing stress and actually sense into where our physiology is at a set point, it gives us power. It gives us leverage, much more so than just approaching it at a head level only. Let's talk for just a minute about the two physiological states that most of us operate within on a day-to-day basis. So there's two general states, and we can shift from one to the other at will with practice. But first we have to know what these two states are. And it's not so black and white as I'm going to map out these two different states. We sort of neurologically move between these two states all day long on any given day. And when we're triggered under fight, flight, or freeze, that kind of stress response, we can go into one state, but then we can move back into more of expansive state. The trick is how long it takes us to move back. So the first state is one that is more survival focused. And this is when we do perceive our physiology, our way of being perceives that there could be a threat. Now our brain, research shows that our brain perceives social threats to our safety, our autonomy, our sense of connection with others, our sense of control over something, right? Our sense of fairness, these kinds of basic things that we look for as humans. When that feels threatened, our bodies, our physiology, as we're taking in information, can get triggered into fight, flight, or freeze. And what happens is, number one, our sight kind of narrows. We zero in on like, what is the source of this stress? Whether it's a snake in the ground, like when it was an external threat, right, back in the day, or if today it's that email or the text that you just got, right? And it kind of makes our focus very narrow and very convergent, which is very helpful in the short term should there be a actual threat that we need to respond to. in a time-sensitive manner. The problem is it's very energy consuming, and what happens to our thoughts in this mode is we become very, very kind of hyper vigilant of our external surroundings. So now our sight has narrowed into one source of what we think the stress is. Then we become hyper vigilant for what else could happen, what other shoe could drop, right? We become focused on our protecting ourselves. So again, we're kind of pulling in to kind of protect ourselves for safety reasons. Again, this is both physical or psychological. And then we get very hyper-focused on time. I always know when I'm in this mode because I go into, there's not enough time. I just can't get all of this done in the amount of time that I have. To me, that's a really quick, very observant kind of way that I can notice I have slipped into survival state. And this is when we are flooded with, we are bathing in the hormones of stress, adrenaline and cortisol, and it literally kind of clouds our ability to make effective decisions. So this is the kind of survival state, and this is something that has helped us in the short term, but over time consumes more of our energy. Now, a more expansive state is one that is kind of called the rest and digest, feed and breed, relaxation state. It's also a state of creation. If you think about your most creative moments in life, you probably felt kind of the opposite of some of the descriptors that I just went through for survival mode, a more expansive sense of time, where there was no kind of real overly focused energy on what happened in the past or a fear of what might come in the future. You were able to just be kind of in flow in the moment, the sweet present moment, really kind of sort of immersing yourself in what could be possible, what could be created. Your physiology is also more in flow. There's deeper breathing. There's a kind of smoother heart rate, right? Your inner world becomes greater than your outer world. In other words, your sense of imagining, it's more expansive because you're not worried about an external threat. And your sense of connecting with your heart's desires, connecting with those around you that you serve is more pronounced rather than falling into judgment around why something is wrong or why someone is wrong, which is a little bit of a protective mode. So when we are in this mode of more creation, it's more being versus falling into doing, right? Constant do in that survival mode keeps us going from one thing to the other. It's the hamster wheel that a lot of these leaders are afraid of falling back into. The being mode is not just sitting on a mountaintop and meditating. It's just a more expansive flow state in the moment that allows us to feel the hormones of oxytocin, DHEA, this sense of flooding, of openness and compassion and heart expansiveness. And that's all accessible to each of us. We've all experienced both of these states, but most of us have overdeveloped. If we've got doing over here as kind of like one muscle and over here being, right? Most of us have overdeveloped doing and we've got a kind of weakened kind of being muscle. The thing is, we want to be able to kind of flex both of these muscles at equal time or equal frequency. In other words, on a given day, are you 50% in doing and 50% in being? Or do you have a little bit more of an imbalance? The sad news is that for the majority of us, research shows that the majority of us would say we are 70% or more in doing and 30% or less in being. So for you, what's your balance? And how intentionally are you developing the being side of yourself? How might you shorten the time when you get in the grip of stress on the doing side and shift yourself intentionally into the being? We'll explore that in a future video on how to take charge of your physiology to reset your state. And as Dr. Carla Stanton and I continue to take a lot of these learnings, and we're actually creating a program, a little mini course called Reset and Rewire. And as we finalize all of that, we're just working on some final touches with some video FAQs after working with a beta group. I'll keep you posted as to what we're developing there and what other tips we might be able to offer you to take charge of your energy through starting with your physiology first.